I'm never eating at a buffet again. I love buffets. I especially love this one Chinese buffet not far from where I live. But what should have been a celebratory visit turned into something unforgettable in the worst possible way. The old stereotype about Chinese restaurants cooking local pets is a myth. But this buffet was serving something far more unsettling. And the man who ordered it, I'm not sure he's of this world. We have a tradition of going to a buffet for my birthday. As I got older, it became harder to get my family together for a meal. My brother left for school, and my parents both got pretty into their jobs. When the day came, I got lucky. My brother came back for a weekend. My parents were busy, but promised we could do dinner later with just them. I could go with my brother now, so I got 2 birthday dinners. I picked out a Chinese buffet that I loved. The food was great, and they had some aquariums with massive koi inside. The place looked beautiful as well. The entire restaurant was covered in red and gold, making me wonder why it wasn't more popular. The hostess silently directed us to an empty table. Besides the workers, we were the only ones inside. For how good the food was, I felt bad that this place wasn't packed. We got our drinks and went to load up our plates. The dinner was fairly normal. I roasted my brother in the way only a little sister could. He pretended to be annoyed, but had fun hanging out after being away for so many months. We tried to stay quiet, though, so we wouldn't disrupt the server's slow night shift. I swore I needed to come by more often after eating 2 plates of different meat dishes. The food had no reason for being this good. Soon I started to get full. We sat and talked for a few more minutes, waiting for our stomachs to settle before attempting to clean the last few bites. As we talked, someone else came in and sat at a table near ours. I glanced over at him, unable to help myself. I've never seen a person like him before. His skin dark, but hair golden. His eyes a bright blue, almost white. It made them look fake, but I didn't know why someone would wear colored contacts to go out for dinner alone. The staff suddenly started to act weird. They whispered something to the man and nodded towards us. I met my brother's eyes to see if he wanted to leave or stay to watch what this was all about. The man said something in a low voice I couldn't make out and waved off the waiter's concerns. The waiter gave us an almost scared look for half a second, then hurried away. Almost everyone working suddenly started to hover nearby. The man dressed in a dark red vest with gold pinstripe threads. His shirt buttoned all the way up to his chin, making his neck look stiff. He rolled up his shirt sleeves to the elbows in such a neat way and buttoned them in place with glittering gold buttons. We both did our best not to stare, finding it hard. He didn't seem to notice the other 2 people looking at him. The stranger sat stiff and proper, waiting for something. The server came over with 2 plates in his hands, piled with stir-fried rice and some sweet and sour chicken. I gave my brother another look, wondering who this guy was that made him so important a buffet server would bring food to him. The plates were set down, and the man started to eat. Then more servers came over. My mouth dropped open as more plates were set down. Soon the entire table was covered with dishes overloaded with different kinds of food. I couldn't even finish a plate and a half of what had been placed in front of this man. Did this guy have friends coming by? No, the table he sat at could only hold 4 people. This was way more than 4 people could eat. In the time the plates had been set down, the man finished the first 2. He set the cleared plates aside, and the server scooped them up for more to be set in their place. This man wasn't big. He looked rail thin, yet in 2 minutes after sitting down, he already ate more than what my brother and I did. We should have paid our bill and left, but we sat transfixed at the sight before us. We no longer tried to hide our staring. Another 4 plates were set aside, and the servers were sweating. They were acting as if a wild animal came inside, but they needed to act professional serving it. The music over the restaurant's sound system cut out, letting us hear the sounds of his cutlery against his plates and a dishwasher faintly running somewhere in the kitchen. Oddly enough, the man wasn't making any disgusting chewing sounds until he got to the shrimp plate. The restaurant served the whole shrimp with the head still attached. I've never tried eating them before. The man didn't take the heads off. He just shoved the whole thing in his mouth, and I could hear the shells crunching as he chewed. I already lost track of how much he'd eaten. I caught my brother's eyes, and he mouthed a silent, "What the freak?" His face was pale, and I assumed my own expression was the same look of horror. The strange man got to a plate of some sweet and sour short ribs. They were my favorite thing at the restaurant, and I tensed up, waiting to see if he ate them the same way he ate the shrimp. Shells were one thing, but bones? There was no way he was going to eat the bones. We both stared, mouths open, as he ate through the pile, bones and all, with no issue. The sound of his teeth cracking against the ribs echoed inside the restaurant. This was insane. There was no way someone could eat like this. We had a chance to just leave. By then, I doubted the owners would care if we fled without paying our bill. There was no way to figure out how much he ate. We lost track of time, but I think it wasn't very long. In under an hour, this man ate more than what some people did in 6 months. Finally, all the plates were removed and replaced by clean, empty ones. He turned to meet our gazes. I nearly screamed, having the set of bright eyes on us. We both froze, unable to move when he stood up, adjusting his vest. Even after eating so much, he didn't make a mess. No drips of sauce on his vest or at the corners of his mouth. He took a few steps over to our table, a smile on his face that made my body want to fold into itself. He stopped and placed a hand on the back of my chair, trying to look as friendly as possible. I looked at my brother, silently begging him to do something. His hand went to his butter knife, gripping it so tightly his knuckles turned white. If this man tried anything with his little sister, he might attack him. Thank God for older brothers. The stranger spoke, his voice sweet and with a hint of a southern accent.
"I'm sorry you both needed to witness all of that. It must have been unnerving for you. But this restaurant had a wonderful dessert prepared for me tonight, and I needed to come in right away."
"You ate the bones," I choked out, unable to say anything else.
"Oh, yes, I'm able to digest things like that," he said, and his eyes fell on our plates. "One should always clean their plates. It's an insult, I say an insult to the chefs and the food otherwise."
We still had a few things left over. I started to sweat, my chest getting tight, waiting for him to do something. My mind went crazy with thoughts of what this man really was and what he would do to us for not finishing our meals.
"But I suppose a few pieces left behind isn't the end of the world," he said, his friendly tone never wavering. "After all, you did see something a bit strange. It's understandable not to finish your dinner with your stomach upset. I'll pay for your meals as an apology. I do know that my eating habits are a bit different from your own."
I sighed, and my brother relaxed his grip on the knife. I wanted to leave, and nearly did so, when I saw his face twist into horror. He saw something before I did, and I heard a sound of muffled screaming. I tensed again, praying that if I didn't move, nothing would happen. The sound got closer. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the servers dragging a bound man through the empty dining room. He struggled harder when he got closer to the table of empty plates, his pleas for help hidden under the cloth stuffed in his mouth. "Oh, there's my special dessert now. This one was found trying to climb into the window of a child in the dead of night. It seems that wasn't the first time he's done so, just the first time he was caught." Hearing those words, my dinner threatened to come back up. I let myself watch the servers place the struggling man on the table and on the plates. He broke a few as they held him still. He kicked and thrashed, causing some of the broken shards to cut his clothing. The stranger didn't mind. He turned from our table to go back to his new meal. I only stayed long enough to watch the stranger's mouth literally unhinge from his jaw. I knew he wouldn't eat his dessert as neat and proper as his dinner. I grabbed my brother by the wrist and dragged him out of that place, letting out a small scream when I heard the first sounds of the stranger biting down. We got into his car and got out of there, neither of us speaking. We didn't even notice my brother accidentally stole the butter knife until we got back home. We threw it out, not wanting the thing in the house. It took hours for either of us to finally speak to each other. "Do you want to go to the movies instead of dinner for your birthday next year?" my brother asked in a shaking voice. I nodded, agreeing with him. It sucks that I could never eat at that restaurant again. I really like their sweet and sour short ribs. Wait, why can the original poster never eat there again? Because there's a vigilante with a few weird eating habits who will agree to comp her meal if she doesn't completely enjoy watching him stuff himself with tables full of food? I don't see the issue. It sounds like he only eats criminals. I know I've said in previous videos that it's wrong to assume people will never change after doing something deplorable, but that was before I learned that taking the opposite view could get me free buffet dinners. I'll watch that guy eat whoever he wants, as long as the place has decent orange chicken. If anything, OP's the sus one here for going to a Chinese restaurant and not even mentioning the egg rolls. Plus, it feels like the chance to end this story on a fortune cookie with a creepy fortune inside was right there, and OP didn't even try. But I do at least find it a little funny that OP swears off buffets forever, as if she's worried that what she saw that night might be a common practice. But only at Chinese buffets and Golden Corral. If you see that guy at a Wendy's, then that would just be downright bizarre. Not that weird things never happen at fast food joints, mind you. For instance, Colonel Sanders was much more sinister than you think. The KFC down the block from my apartment had the creepiest statue of Colonel Sanders I've ever seen. It stood in a corner of the dining room, at least 8 feet tall, looming over customers as they scarfed down chicken and mashed potatoes. No one ever sat at the table closest to the statue. There was just a bad vibe the closer you got to the thing. Cold spots, weird smells, a sense that you were being watched. The creepy statue didn't stop me from eating at KFC at least twice a week, but it did dampen the experience. It was eerie how lifelike the sculpture looked. The perfect white hair and goatee, the wrinkles under the eyes, the ivory pale suit, and just a peak of pink tongue inside square teeth. You half expected the giant thing to clear its throat at any moment. Weird, like I said, but manageable as a customer. But once I started working part-time at KFC one winter to save up for gifts, I swore off fast food for good. Things weren't too bad until they moved me to the night shift about a month into my time at the restaurant. If the Colonel Sanders statue was creepy during the day, it was downright freaky at night. The face always seemed a little different each time I glanced at it, the eyes a bit colder. I started taking pictures of the statue each night to check if it was really changing. However, no matter the angle or lighting, the pics always turned out blurry on my phone. I didn't much enjoy going to work, but I managed to push through because the pay kept going up. Even after the holidays, I decided to stay on, since I was now making enough to actually save for the first time in my life. Then, one night in January, I made a terrible mistake. I offered to close the KFC on my own after the night shift. Mandy was supposed to help me. She's a cute redhead that started around the same time I did. But she was feeling ill, so I offered to handle closing solo. I was trying to score some points with her before working up the courage to ask her on a date. After that awful night, I never saw Mandy again. Once the last customers were gone, I began closing. I locked the doors, turned off the main lights, then pulled out a Bluetooth speaker and started to mop up while jamming to some classic rock. I wiped down all surfaces except that table near the Sanders statue. Nobody sat there, so it was always pristine. I worked fast. We had an official policy to only ever close with 2 or more staff on site. The official reason was for safety and accountability. But as the minutes ticked by, I began to feel like someone was moving around the restaurant, just out of my sight. I was about to start cleaning the bathrooms when I heard a commotion from the kitchen. "Mandy?" I called out, holding my mop up for self-defense, I guess. There was a scraping sound, followed by silence. I hopped over the counter, still holding onto the mop like it was a club. Something had knocked over the warming station in the back of the kitchen. It's a series of metal shelves and heat lamps that we use to keep food hot. It was heavy, too. Far too heavy for a draft or a rat to displace. Yeah, we had rats. I leaned the mop against the wall and pushed the warming station back into position. When I turned back towards the dining room, I yelped. The Colonel Sanders statue had moved while I wasn't looking. It hadn't shifted much, just a slight turn of the head. But it was unmistakably different than moments before. His eyes were wider, almost black in the low light, and his smile was sharper than before. "I'm imagining this," I said out loud, clutching the mop so hard my knuckles popped. The statue didn't respond. I mean, of course it didn't. It was a freaking statue after all. Nothing but plaster and paint. Still, I decided to rush through the bathroom cleaning and risk getting a reprimand from my supervisor at my next shift. "Are you here alone?" a raspy voice asked me from farther back in the kitchen. I froze. "Mandy?" I asked again, still not turning to look. "No, sorry, not Mandy." The voice was male, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Swallowing hard, I turned to look for the source. There was something wrong with the light at the back of the kitchen. Everything was cast in a deep, unnatural shade. I saw a figure within the gloom, a shadow darker than the shadows around it, shaped like a man. "Who are you?" I asked. I couldn't see its face, but I had the impression the shadow just smiled. "I was many things," it said. "A soldier, a chef, a business owner, human. Now what I am is here, with you. Did you say that you were alone, or did I imagine that?" My mouth was dry. I was having a hard time speaking. There was a loud creak from the dining room behind me. Then another. I glanced back quickly, not wanting to take my eyes off the shadow in the kitchen for too long. The Colonel Sanders statue had moved again. Now it was standing in the middle of the dining room, partially hunched over like it was trying to speak, or getting ready to leap. "Do you know why I started calling these places KFC?" the shadow asked. I turned back around to find that it was closer to me. The light in all of the kitchen was dim now and growing darker by the minute. I felt trapped between two hungry things, just waiting for me to run so they could chase me. All I could think to do was stall for time. "KFC, well, it means Kentucky Fried—" "No!" the shadow man growled. "That's what they made me call it. But KFC originally stood for the kind of crowd I wanted to bring into my restaurants. Killer's favorite chicken." That creak came again from behind me. I knew the statue was moving. There was the sound of heavy dragging, tables being pushed out of the way. I wanted to turn and look, but didn't want to put my back to the shadow. Any moment, I expected to feel a giant plaster hand reach around my neck and squeeze. A bell rang softly. Suddenly, the light was back to normal. "Nick?" a familiar voice called out. "Why are you standing behind the counter holding up a mop?" It was Mandy. She'd come in from the front door, unlocking it with her staff key. I put the mop down and leaned against the counter. There was no sign of the shadow thing in the kitchen. When I looked out over the dining room, I saw that the Colonel Sanders statue was back in its usual corner, exactly how it was at the start of my shift. But the face was different, the smile tighter, its fist clenched in frustration. "Geez, Nick, you look awful," Mandy said, walking toward me. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I felt guilty asking you to close up solo," she said. "I figured I would help you finish up." Nick, are you okay? You look like you're going to throw up." Without a word, I hopped over the counter, took Mandy's hand, and walked us both out of the KFC without locking up. Just as the front door was closing, I heard another creak, as if some massive plaster figure was shifting to watch us leave. That was the last time I stepped foot in a KFC or any other restaurant. I quit the next morning, calling my manager to make sure she knew it was my fault the place wasn't closed properly. I didn't want Mandy to get in trouble, though I did beg her to find somewhere else to work. She promised she'd think about it. I never did work up the nerve to ask her out. I ended my lease early and moved out of the city within a month. I've got a new place now, smaller, but comfortable enough. I don't leave my apartment much these days. I'm able to work from home, and I get all of my food delivered. The rare times I step outside for a walk, I walk fast. Maybe it's my imagination, but sometimes it feels like something is out there, looking for me, just out of sight. On the worst days, I'll see a brief flash of white moving fast out of my vision. When I sleep, which isn't often, I dream of creaking sounds and shadows where they shouldn't be. This story, as funny as it may sound, was voted the scariest no-sleep story of 2019. It was also voted the most immersive. I hope the Colonel appreciates these high honors that have been awarded to him. Although, for a story voted to be the most immersive one posted in the course of an entire year, the comments seem pretty detached from the narrative. A lot of them are simply complaining that KFC's gravy seems to have changed over the years. That must be some kind of Mandela effect nonsense. Unless they're saying it's gotten better, because that stuff is just as good as I can ever remember it being. Then again, maybe it's lost its kick because we as a society have grown so numb. Maybe one of the 11 herbs and spices was fear. On the other hand, I like to think OP just misinterpreted this whole thing. That killer's favorite chicken wasn't as creepy as it sounded, and the Colonel was really just saying he thought there ought to be a fast food joint for war veterans. I just can't be too scared of a guy who's been played on TV by Norm Macdonald. The King from Burger King, though, there's a fast food icon that could give me nightmares. What fast food mascots scare the pants off of you? Let us know down in the comments.